Good evening, Shiru Mwangi.
Good evening.
Shiru is the head of agriculture debt investments responsibility. She's in charge of sub-Saharan Africa. Please tell us about your region and what is the size of debt investments of responsibility in the region, and a little bit more about what are the commodities you finance.
That we're financing. We actually have about $60 million invested in the region. And sub-Saharan Africa, we look after West Africa and East Africa. And when you look at the countries we're in, there are 14 countries.
Okay.
11 commodities, and the largest exposure is to cashew and coffee. Those are significant commodities, but otherwise we are in quite a few. We're in cocoa, we are in maize, we are in cottonseed oil. So there's quite a diversity of product that we look after.
So what kind of financing you give? It is more of trade financing or it is for asset creation?
Okay, well, when we look at the portfolios we hold, to be fair, we are 2/3 in short-term working capital and 1/3 in long-term financing. Now, the working capital really is to allow either traders or processors to buy the raw product, whether it be cashew, whether it be coffee, whether it be maize for milling. So we invest in we provide working capital finance to allow for purchase of the raw material, and then we also finance on long-term basis processing capacity. So if you are looking to put up a plant and you're looking to process any of the commodities that we're comfortable with, then we will finance the acquisition of capex, essentially the plant itself, the warehousing, the logistics, the vehicles to be able to transport the commodity. So we do finance that piece as well. Generally, you'll find that each commodity has its own cycle. Some are very short-term in purchasing nature, and others you can purchase throughout the course of the year. So that will drive the kind of funding structure we put in place.
Right. Whenever we talk about Africa, two challenges come when it comes to financing: access to finance, cost of finance. How responsibilities, initiatives, and action is addressing these two issues?
Access to funding is still a very significant problem in Africa, simply because one is the startup nature of many businesses. Secondly is the lack of experience in the commodities that they are trading or processing. And the third is years of experience. Most financial institutions want to see a track record that is robust. They want to see profitability over a period of time, and they want to see significant equity contribution by the promoters.
But you would also see the same thing?
Now that makes it very difficult. What we have tended to do is we are not we're not such sticklers for the asset base which we're funding. We're not sticklers for putting in security over all your assets and mortgaging all your significant property and requiring you to give us guarantees, whether it's corporate or personal guarantees. Those are not what drive our business. We're very clear that we look at your ability to generate cash flow.
How do you see that? I'm just asking you.
How do we see the ability to generate cash flow?
Yes, yeah.
We're looking at your funding structures in general. We're saying, okay, if you are producing commodity X or you're processing commodity X, who is your buyer? What is your ability to generate cash from doing this transaction? And can we fund that working capital that will allow you to generate the cash?
So you have three segments. There is a producer of commodity, there is a processor of commodity, and between the producer and the processor, the traders. Who are you most comfortable lending to?
We'll always be most comfortable funding the processor.
Processors?
Yes.
Why is it so?
And there's a very
They're more
simple
organized?
reason. What it is if you look at traders, generally traders will be very short-term in nature, and we put in structures that require a lot of investment on our part, from a legal to structuring of the transaction, to involving our teams to be able to make sure it works, whether it's the collateral management structures or various other structures that we put in place. The trade then takes a very short time, and you find that we may not find the transactions as remunerative as longer term transactions. With processors, we will fund them from the point of purchasing the commodity itself, which is usually a short period of time, to the warehousing of that commodity as they slowly and surely turn it into the processed commodity, and then finally to the end position where they're selling to a buyer in a market that we are very comfortable with. And so that process, we work very closely with the promoter to understand it well and to be able to put it in place, because it gives us time to really understand their business. And once we're able to finance that, that's also where we see the productive capacity, that's where we see the employment capacity being created.
The social impact part of it.
The social impact, but it's also where we see the foreign exchange flows back into the countries, which is really a challenge within the African countries. And of course, when we look at funding in Africa also, it's really the smaller companies that struggle to get adequate financing.
Now, you talked about processes. I wanted to ask you, you are a Swiss-based company.
That is correct.
Would you also help processors link up with these markets as a part of your service portfolio? Is it a part of your service offering?
Historically, commodities have their natural home.
Okay, so you don't need to facilitate that.
This is it. You know, if you look at the commodities and you look at the flows of commodities, you will come to understand that, for example, cashew, which is why we're here. Clearly, the buyers of raw cashew are in India and Vietnam. The buyers who process cashew, the kernel, are in Europe and America.
Partly.
So we are able to say, okay, this is the flow of this commodity, and generally you'll find the same buyers in these markets are buying from each of the companies which we are financing. So we get to build relationships with the buyers as well. So it's much easier for us to be able to assess, will this company be able to repay the facilities we lend them? If we know the end buyers, then we understand their behavior, we take comfort.
So a contract from Costco or Walmart or Intersnack would be a great advantage.
Is something that we can then fund.
Yeah. So now, for example, Africa is moving towards processing. So there is a need for more long-term finance.
That's correct.
Where do you see the opportunity in that, in cashew sector specifically?
No, I think that's definitely the opportunity. I think we're seeing regulatory environments are becoming more restrictive, and we are seeing that there is a lot of encouragement toward local processing. Putting aside the carbon footprint we've been talking about, there is definitely a case to be made for processing on the African continent, and there's definitely a case for transfer of expertise. Because at the end of the day, we need to ensure that the processed commodity is of a quality that can be exported.
So you see
those are the skill sets that are not in place on the African continent. It's a skill set we need to build over time. So there is an opportunity to process on the continent. There is encouragement by governments for that processing.
So you see an opportunity for long-term finance as well?
We always will.
So where do you see 60 million growing up to in the next 5 years?
Oh my word, you really want me to commit to that figure.
You see that the growth is very...
It's actually,
very
the growth
big,
is big, the opportunity for growth is big. The opportunity to invest in that growth is also big. What we now need is the promoters who have the capacity to put that growth into place.
That's great actually, and there are enough and more people who are entrepreneurial and who are passionate and they're waiting for the opportunity like this.
We are very happy to work with them.
Thank you so much, Shiru. It was wonderful talking.